Hi, it's Nathan from I Need IVF. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about NHS and private IVF costs in the UK. So first of all, we'll have a quick look at what IVF market looks like within the UK. So currently, the IVF market is worth £330 million. So that's quite a substantial amount of money. And at the moment, it's growing at approximately 10% per year, which means that by 2026, the IVF market in the UK will be worth approximately £655 million, which is really, really, really big business. So what does that mean for you and me and IVF as a whole? So first of all, we need to have a think about how people are actually getting IVF in the UK. So unlike America, we are quite lucky that we do have a national health system, and some treatments, some IVF treatments are actually available on the NHS. So unfortunately though, we have a regulatory body called NICE. NICE say that in the UK we should offer 3 cycles of IVF treatment to couples who have been trying for 2 years, whose BMI is generally under 35, and that is about it really. I mean, there are some lifestyle parts to the eligibility criteria for certain trusts, but that's effectively what it says. But one of the things that is actually quite shocking is that of all of the CCGs, so the CCGs are clinical commissioning groups, and they are basically the entities that fund what healthcare provision goes on within a certain area. So in the UK there are 232 of them, I believe, in the UK as a whole, and currently only 25% of those CCGs actually follow the NICE guidelines of 3 cycles. So I know that's all maths, but what does that actually mean in practice? Well, the stats for IVF seem to come out a couple of years behind. So in 2017, there were a total number of 69,822 cycles of IVF treatment in the UK, which is a huge number. But of those, 43,307 of them were private. So the vast majority of IVF cycles in the UK are actually private. The other area that actually isn't captured within the statistics is those who actually go abroad for treatment. In the UK, because the regulatory body only tracks information about IVF clinics in the UK, it doesn't actually track how many people are going abroad. There are some very small studies out there that show approximately 21,000 people a year are going abroad, which brings the total IVF cycles for UK couples and individuals up to 90,000 IVF cycles a year. A huge, huge, huge amount. So now you've got a good idea about how many cycles actually take place. Let's have a think about how much that actually costs A, the NHS, and B, most importantly, us as individuals in the UK. So for the NHS, it currently costs them, just for IVF cycles alone, around £95.09 million. That is not a huge amount of money. In fact, it's 0.039% of their total budget per year. So it's not a lot of money, and in fact there was a very interesting research article that was written that showed that even if the NHS were to follow the NHS protocol across the whole of the UK, which obviously is the right thing to do, and I think fertility fairness is important so that it no longer becomes a postcode lottery, then that article has shown that it would only just double their cost. So the impact would be quite minor in the grand scheme of their entire budget. But most importantly, what does IVF cost UK couples and individuals? So we spent about 30-35 hours doing an awful lot of research looking at the clinics that are in the UK, the costs. We have created a spreadsheet that broke down all of the costs of the UK clinics, and we looked at the average. So there are currently 97 licensed clinics in the UK. From that, we managed to find the average cost. So I'm going to put some of the figures on the screen. However, the most important ones are that an IVF cost for a standard IVF cycle on average is £4,589 per cycle. That is with no ICSI, that is with no frozen embryos. ICSI, which accounts for about 24,000 cycles a year in the UK, so just over a third of cycles in the UK require ICSI, that adds another, on average, £897 to your cycle. That's just your treatment. With private, you also have to have pre-treatment costs, which include consultations, tests, etc. And those add another £536 per cycle. You know, there are other add-ons, you know, such as embryo glue, which came out at 193, PGS testing, which is genetic testing, that came out an average of £2,603. And the average annual freezing charge, if you are lucky enough to get embryos to freeze, was £378. All of this adds up. Now, we looked at some research from the NHS that showed specifically that on average it takes UK couples 2.2 cycles to get pregnant. So if we utilise that as an idea of how much IVF costs to actually get pregnant and get to a live birth, to actually have a baby, what we find is that those that are very lucky have one cycle of IVF, produce lots of embryos, those embryos fertilise, they go into good quality blastocysts, and therefore they have enough embryos to freeze, and then they can use what's called a frozen embryo transfer. So using that 2.2 average and the average costs that are associated with those treatments, that couple, and that is the perfect example, that is the luckiest example, they can't get any luckier than that. The average cost for live birth is £7,210.60 per live birth. Remember, that is the easy option. That's easy is the wrong word, but it is the option that means they have to have the least amount of treatment. So if we just think about individuals who don't get embryos to freeze, that's people like myself and Rachel. So we went through IVF, we did get embryos, but unfortunately we didn't have any that were of good enough quality to freeze. We were lucky just to get some that worked. Those individuals who have to go through IVF for all their cycles, the cost is £11,275 per live birth. And finally, for those individuals who have male factor infertility, so those that actually require ICSI, which is basically where they inject the sperm into the egg in order to help it fertilise, those individuals, through the same criteria, their costs would be £13,248. So the financial impact of IVF is substantial. You see comments out there where people state things like, if you can't afford IVF, you can't afford to bring up a child. My argument to that is, who has £7,000, £11,000, £13,000 sitting in the bank to spend on an unborn child they haven't even had? Not many people. And I think that is something we need to change within the mindset around fertility treatment in the UK. It is a huge, huge, huge financial impact on individuals who have fertility issues. So those costs currently are where they are. We are expecting the market to grow, as we mentioned at the beginning of this video, and one of the things we are starting to see in a similar vein to the United States, where IVF costs can be upwards of £10,000 per cycle, is that big conglomerates are actually starting to take over individual clinics. So you have large-scale IVF clinics running 8, 9, 10, 11 clinics around the UK. What that actually does is that reduces the competition amongst those clinics. And one of the concerns that is currently around is that that reduction in competition will actually lead to higher IVF prices as we go on. So it's important to keep in mind that the current prices are likely to go up substantially over the next 5 to 10 years if that competition doesn't maintain itself within the UK. There are other costs associated with IVF as well, because those are the direct costs. You also have travel costs. It sounds silly, but when Rachel and I, we are only 25 miles away from our IVF clinic. We have parking costs, we had other costs. We went to the clinic about 10 times per cycle, and the parking in the city centre is about £8 a time. So that sounds silly, but that's yet another £80. Then you need some food, you can be at the clinic for a long time. So all of those costs do add up. You've got the emotional cost, especially if you do end up having unsuccessful treatments, and actually dealing just with your infertility can come with an emotional challenge. Now in the UK we can access support services through our GP, but unfortunately those often have a 12 to 20 week waiting list. So people often turn to private support, and whilst your clinic should offer you some support, if you're going privately, normally that is only one session. So if you need ongoing counselling, ongoing therapies, it's something you have to pay for. And those come in at sort of £20 to £50 per hour. So that's another thing that you have to factor in. And then a cost that's really difficult to calculate, but it's the employment cost. Now, going through IVF treatment is very, very difficult on the female body. You're being pumped through hormones. You are going to be having so many symptoms potentially, and those symptoms can actually impact your employment, whether that's through productivity, whether that's through you having to take sick leave, whether that's you having to take, authorised leave. But this does have an impact on your financial position. Not many people have great sick leave policy, so it's very possible that you won't be paid during periods of your IVF treatments. That can have another impact. So the costs for IVF are substantial. Now, as I mentioned earlier, 21,000 there or thereabouts are choosing to go abroad for their IVF treatment. Now, there are a number of reasons for this. One is that they are regulated less rigorously than in the UK. That often means that you can have more blastocysts implanted. It often means they can be slightly more aggressive with their stimulation treatment. Obviously all of that comes with risks. With the slightly more aggressive stimulation, you're more likely to get OHSS. With more blastocysts being implanted, you're more likely to have multiple pregnancies, which comes with its own risk. But the key factor for people going abroad for treatment is actually the price. As we said earlier, 2.2 cycles is the average number of IVF cycles it takes to get to a live birth. So it's not an impact of one cycle. By going abroad, you can save a huge amount of money. So let's just take 3 of the most common ones that are currently used in the UK. The Czech Republic, Spain and Greece. So if you go to the Czech Republic, the average saving per IVF cycle is £3,255. That means if you have to have 3 cycles, that saves you just shy of £10,000 for your treatment. So £9,765. That's a huge amount of money. Even if you take into account the cost of travel, you are still going to be saving over £7,000. Spain, one of the really popular, has got more expensive in the last 2 or 3 years. However, even the costs there, you are still saving £1,330 per cycle. So over 3 cycles again, that is literally just shy of £4,000. So again, when you factor in travel costs, you are still saving a huge amount of money. And another one that is up and coming is Greece. Per cycle you save £2,475 per cycle. So over the 3, that's £7,425. A lot of money to be saved. I think as well that, as we mentioned, the financial impacts on individuals who have to go through IVF, either because they're not eligible for NHS treatment, their area doesn't provide it, or they've exhausted all other options, is huge. People are choosing to get out loans, they're choosing to go into debt, they're choosing to ask family and friends. People are having to take quite extreme measures to find the money in order to have a child. So just be aware of how much IVF costs, and it's not like you think, okay, I'm starting to try and conceive, I'll save just in case I'm infertile. People don't think like that. So often you get to the point of being given that infertility diagnosis, having to look for treatment options and realising, wow, this is expensive. So this is just to try and educate people about how much IVF costs. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and pop back later for more videos. Thank you.